Jerry Gidel is ready to anticipate the USDA's April report and yet talk about these corn and soybean markets right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we sort of got a recovery in these agricultural commodity markets. What can you assess about that?
Well, yeah, we've been a little choppy of that. I think the issues, uh, yeah, reports out about India having some problems. Maybe they're going to be a buyer of wheat. We've also ended up different weather situations there in the Black Sea and also Europe has had their conditions drift a little lower. That really is a positive today. It really gave us a pop going, and it ran through a downtrend line and added to the enthusiasm. And that we ended up closing on that exact level on May at 567. So it'll be interesting how the market wants to take it next week. But I kind of feel like that springtime always provides a lot of more uncertainty for crops. Looking over at the corn market, same situation there. It had a big rally after the crop report and then went back down. And actually, this week's kind of recovered the last 3 or 4 days. And so basically, I think the wet weather that we've had in the eastern corn belt here. And cold and wet, and it's surprising how many baseball games got postponed or since the season just started, or the same situation of the reality of the fact that everybody was really fired up to plant things this spring because we had such a warm winter and that. But now all of a sudden we get late March, early April, and we've got kind of overcast skies and rain. We didn't get heavy amounts. Interestingly, for 3 or 4 days here, we got lots of half-inch amounts. So that's definitely doesn't promote a lot of plantings. I'd say right now that the end of this coming week might be the first time we'll get a chance to see another burst of planting on that. Soybeans, they were a little choppy here. The reports out of South America continue to be mixed. A lot of attitudes there about the crops maybe being smaller, but the some of the tours down there that they've had. I think the latest one was uh, came out with a 152 number. That's down from 155, but I wonder if the whole scenario right now is that Mato Grosso is pretty well done. Harvesting, same thing for Rio Grande, Mato Grosso del Sol, Paraná. Even Goiás doesn't have much left to plant. So we're talking about the northern areas and then Rio Grande do Sul. So, but the same situation is going on there in the soybeans at this point. If we get some action going on there and certainties that we've kind of drifted down here since before the crop report. So if we can get an action above $12, we could have a swing in that market too. But right now, at least the market's going to be concentrated on next week's reports. We've got the updates from our quarterly stocks, and we also had our planning intentions, which provided some excitement there, as we already seen in the corn from that standpoint. The one thing that the USDA doesn't do, though, next Thursday is provide any type of S&D outputs for the 2024-25 year. That will come out in May. And so to some extent, we always have some impact, though, if we make adjustments in old crop. And then the big question continues to be, will the USDA use their wintertime yield trends for the coming year? Those are really based on long-term trends and things like that on least squares type of approaches. And that right now, at least last year, they actually did slip down their number on the yields on corn and beans from because of the weather we had. And actually, at that time, we were getting the crop in fast, but it was the crop conditions. Uh, had very good dryness, basically from Nebraska all the way into Indiana. So that's not likely the case, at least right now, at least at this time right now.
Well, since you mentioned South America, we have been hearing that in Argentina there are complications to start the corn harvest, and in Brazil we have high temperatures in the Safrinha areas without so much rain. So that is another factor for corn at this.
Those are exactly the two things that you actually brought up to me earlier this, actually one today and one yesterday, or the last few days. Wow. Ancientry enough, the corn, excuse me, safrinha corn, which is planted this year very, very rapidly in February, and that because we've had some issues and things of that nature, getting the crop out because it was delayed planting in the fall, things of that nature. And that is interesting as to we had a pretty good rush of plantings out there, but it also means that the vulnerability of weather is all the same. And I think that's huge in Brazil. And then the one thing that you brought up today, which was very interesting about some issues in uh, Argentina about their crop issues that, and actually it turns up I actually saw some of that up on the wires here this afternoon about a it looks like to me it's a grasshopper issue that turns is bringing along a virus that is actually impacting the crop down there, and that's really a bizarre situation. Grasshoppers have their own issue about chewing too much of the crop, but at this point, it sounds like they're bringing along some type of a virus that's impacting the crop. And our friends at Buenos Aires Exchange, they actually took 2 million out of their crop estimate from 54 down to 52 million metric tons. And that is actually 4 million below the USDA's number. So the trade is kind of looking for a 54 million number. Now, all of a sudden, the exchange down there has even reduced it down two more.
Yes, and what else can you anticipate about the April's report from the United States Department of Agriculture?
Well, it's an interesting one at this point because the big boogeyman always is what the size of the new crop corn and bean crops are going to be. And to some extent, corn crops number was pretty. It took about 1.5 million less than expected. But the thing gets back to what are they going to use on yield? As I mentioned earlier, the USDA in May last year actually took off I think it was 181 and a half they had in the wintertime. They went down to 179 right out of the chute because of the weather pattern we had. I'd have to say, though, they're probably not going to do that on new crop. But the things that we're going to see on next Thursday's report on corn and soybeans are going to reflect what's happened here in our quarterly numbers that we have got on the stocks reports and along with our demand numbers. Beans, we had a very excellent record level of U.S. soybean crush at 593 million from the data we've got over the last 10 days or so. Exports, we just got an update on that a couple days ago. Soybeans were a little disappointing from a year ago's numbers, but from expectations, they were about, I think they were a lot closer to 20 million higher than expected from there. And so overall, I guess because of the demand we've got for renewable diesel and that there's a little trickiness of what we're going to do with this meal. that's created out of the soybean crush in the U.S. But I think there's still going to be some place to move that supply, both domestically and internationally. But I'm kind of anticipating that maybe the USDA is going to increase our crush by 30, but decrease our exports by 10 or 20, I'm sorry, which would create a 10 million reduction in their latest carryover stock for row crop, which would be a 305 million. And that now that's not a crazy number by any means, but I think it suggests it's going the right way. And I think also that it's going to be a situation where these export scenario could be impacted if we have more problems in Argentina. And that going forward on their crops at this point. Of course, the other biggie that we always have to watch is in the U.S. is corn. The statistics that we've had in that market, we had a very solid kind of quarterly demand. Actually, we had more uh, ethanol demand in February than we had in January, which is quite unusual because the fact that we have 2 days, well, 3 days normally. This year was only 2 days less because of the calendar and that. So it turns up that even then, though, the looks like to me that our demand number here on quarterly uh, FSI type scenario, that's feed, seed, and industrial, which is ethanol, and that could be the highest number we've had since clear back in the spring of 2020, which was really the beginning of the ethanol, or excuse me, the COVID issues we've had in the US. So that's a real positive sign. There's just no doubt about that. From there, the US ethanol or US exports, by the way, they came in at 570. That's not great as high as we had a couple years ago, but hugely better than by about 200 million than we had a year ago. And it's also a number higher when the monthly Census Bureau statistics came out. So both of those were higher than expected, if you want to say that. From there, feed demand, which was really when you put those data in and put it in comparison, that's how you come up with your feed demand. Because feed demand in the U.S. is there's not a lot of corn that stays on farm can be fed to livestock or shift between farms and not go across the scale. So, and that's how you determine what kind of feed demand you had. It's kind of a residual number after we get our quarterly stocks together, and the quarterly stocks number was about 80 to 90 million, and even 100 million less than some people were looking for. And so the feed demand, I think, actually could go up 50 million on this upcoming report. And I think ethanol could go up 50 million. The one thing is not so optimistic is the exports. They've been kind of slowing down a little earlier than normal. They're still, well, we've had 45s to 50s, and this last week we slipped down below 40 million. I think though that I think that's potentially could be off 50 million from USDA, but overall our carryover stock could be down to 2.12 billion bushels. That's 50 million less. I think. Well, to some extent, those two are positive out there on what the numbers is. Now, the trade expectations are. I haven't seen the Reuters numbers at this point, but the trade ideas on those are kind of mixed comparison to my theories, and that I think there's a little more optimism about corn demand being a little stronger than and our carryover stock being a little lower. But beans, they're definitely, even some people anticipating that bean number to be higher because of this exports, which have been pretty lackluster over the last month or so, primarily because the world's down in South America loading up on soybeans there, and so there's not a real need for that type of scenario here for demand for stuff in the U.S. So uh, right now the wheat market's it's struggling at this point. the activity in the uh, markets there. We did have a solid kind of export activity during the third quarter here for them. Very similar to last year's number, right around 177, 178 million exports. And that was a little higher than the actual inspections would have told us. But the biggest problem with in the thing right now is that the exports are also struggling, similar to what's going on in beans. And so I think there's a 20 million decline in exports while you turn around and having a well, a little less in imports, a little higher on food usage, a little higher on seeds because we had these higher than expected spring wheat and durum planting. So from there, so it's a 10 million adjustment. It's not big, but the going up the last few months probably isn't a good psychology. In the wheat, the biggest thing in wheat is that the weather conditions this spring and how the U.S. crop comes through. Right now, there's the first projections on conditions for the U.S. Are up significantly from last year. And that I think they're at 56% good and excellent, which doesn't sound exciting, but a year ago there were 27% good and excellent from there. But we'll have to. Wheat is so important as to where the weather is late April through the first half of May, as they're coming out of dormancy and what type of moisture is available for the crop at that time. So, U.S. wheat production still has some uncertainties going forward.
All right. So what are you expecting for the markets next week?
Well, I guess I'm looking at the wheat market maybe surprisingly. I don't think wheat's a real biggie, but from the standpoint of the report, as I said, I think we might actually go up 10 million on that. But I think uncertainties in the wheat market and what's coming out of the Black Sea and things like that. One thing we didn't touch on so far has been a kind of an interesting conflict that's popped up between the Ukrainian shippers, which before a lot of these and the Russians were shipping were done by the big exporters, the Cargills, the Bungys, Dreyfuses, but they all pulled out, and now there's the other people involved in the actual shipping of things. And the wheat side of things, they've had some conflicts about the quality of the crop, and unfortunately, I think the Moscow thinks that the quality of their crop is better than what the shippers are realizing, and they've got to discount it to get it sold and out the door, and that's below the thunder that the threshold that they want to sell it at. So there's been a lot of conflict on that, and that's going to be watched closely in wheat. But I really think that South America's reports here in both Brazil and Argentina and how their crops are going to influence both the beans and the corn. From there, because I do think, as I said, we've got maybe some slightly smaller old crop carryover stocks going forward. And in this whole scenario about corn, and that we really taken a huge chunk out of our plannings at this point. And I wonder if there won't be some nervousness about maybe trying to get the corn prices a little more aggressive. We probably need to end up seeing that market get above the 445, 47 zone, where we did make some sales earlier at that level up there, and see if we can get a chance to get it pushed up into the 465, 470 zone. I don't know if that's going to happen next week, but I think it's a factor out here to attract more acres for the U.S. When you take out that many number of acres. And interestingly enough, those acres are not just all Western Corn Belt acres. There's a lot of acres in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, where and even Iowa, where there's chances for some pretty good yields here. So we'll be watching the skies, and we'll be watching what the world wants to think about production in both South America and in Europe and Ukraine.
All right. Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a good weekend and watch your NCAA teams and see who wins.